Square Enix has been pushing out more and more PC ports, which is actually quite fantastic. However, they've become a little bit notorious when it comes to their Japanese titles, as their ports are not particularly great. They've been having a lot of different people kind of go in and try different ports and things like that, and I think they're just trying to teach all their studios how to do PC. That way their future titles will release on the platform to be good. But regardless, this one's kind of so-so. Michael here with a PC launch overview for Star Ocean, The Last Hope, 4K and Full HD Remaster, which is actually the full title, which really they just should have called it Remastered, because unless they decide later on that they want an 8K version or something like that. I guess they're kind of keeping their options open. Regardless, it's kind of a weird title. But yeah, this is Star Ocean, which I did not expect them to ever port this game, because for one, this game did not particularly get a great critical reception. A lot of people think it's the worst Star Ocean, but there's also a lot of people that actually like it quite a bit, and it did have quite a bit of fanfare. However, it didn't even reach Steam's top sellers list when it released, or even get to its new releases section, which is actually curated by the number of people that buy the game. So this isn't a particularly popular title, but I'm a sucker for JRPGs. This one's sci-fi. I never got to check it out. I checked out Star Ocean Second Story, which was on the PS1, I believe, and I thought it was all right. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit, but at the same time, I haven't played one since then, so this is actually a new experience for me. That said, we're going to be talking about the PC port issues, which it has... Oh, okay, well, it's going to go ahead and try to play that cutscene again, because I took too long talking. Apologies for that. But we're going to be talking about the technical details. There are a lot of problems with this port, but at the same time, it's actually not a terrible port when you get into the game and are actually playing it. When you're playing it, it runs perfectly smooth, and it looks actually pretty good with the exception of some draw distance issues. And so it actually looks really good for a 2009 game. They did a great job kind of updating it and everything. The textures look great. The menus are a little outdated, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. If you're wondering on my impressions of the game, I'm only a few hours in, but I will talk about those after we go over the PC details. Let's go ahead and jump into the settings. It does have graphical options at the very bottom, but we will start off at the top. You get controller vibration, which I'm really happy they actually put in. This is something we've been losing in a lot of PC ports, so it's really, really nice that this is here, and it actually works perfectly fine, which is freaking wonderful. I love it. You can also rebind absolutely everything, which is super, super nice, except for on the controller, you can't rebind your start and menu key or start and select buttons. And so that's a little bit annoying, but at the same time, it's whatever, quite frankly. It's not something you'd be using in the game anyways. They're kind of annoying to press regardless. But you can rebind absolutely everything, including the keyboard controls. You cannot use your function keys sometimes. I don't really know why. Sometimes it lets me use them. Sometimes it doesn't. When I was messing around with this, I don't want to screw with it right now because the menu's a little bit finicky. You do have to go into it, and then, whenever you try to exit out, you actually have to save it and return, which is super, super annoying. But you can rebind everything. Like, I can set the F keys here, but for some reason, sometimes when I click them, it just doesn't respond. However, when I push other keys, it's 100% responsive. So just don't use your function keys, and you should be fine. I don't think you'll need them. One thing to mention about the mouse support is that there is no mouse cursor. You'll notice my mouse actually, is it on screen? Yeah, I guess it's on screen. It's not actually even showing my mouse on screen. Basically, there's no mouse support when it comes down to actually navigating the menus. You have to use the scroll bar, or you have to use your keyboard to actually go around. And when you get into game, I'll show this off a little bit later, but basically the camera can be controlled with the mouse, but is abysmally slow and just not worth trying out. And so basically just expect to not use your mouse if you're going to use a keyboard. It does play perfectly fine with the keyboard, and you can actually change your button display as well to keyboard. And it does have controller buttons as well, which is going to be stuck in Xbox controllers, which is kind of expected on Windows machine, although it would be nice to have things like a PlayStation setup or buttons like numbered setup. That would be kind of nice, but regardless, deal with it. And so, yeah, just once again, I recommend a controller because it is an action game, but at the same time, it's perfectly fine on keyboard. It's just you're not going to be using your mouse. And then you get some other stuff that doesn't affect the PC port. And then you get your language settings. Oh yeah, like the invert controls and stuff like that as well. Some people care about that. And then you also get your subtitles. And so basically, I recommend having this on for certain cutscenes, especially if you actually take everyone's advice. And if you don't understand Japanese, switch it to the Japanese voice setting, because basically the voice acting in this game for both the English and the Japanese, I'll talk about that a little bit later when I go into my impressions so far, is pretty bad. So you'll honestly, if you play the Japanese voices and you don't understand Japanese, chances are you won't notice how bad it is. But at the same time, I'm running it on English because I'm fine with cheesy voice acting, although it does kind of irk me here and there. And then you also have the text settings and stuff like that. So basically that's going to change your subtitles and non-voice scenes as well, which is kind of nice to have that option. Then you have multiple volume sliders, which is super, super nice. I love seeing that. I hate how many games don't have that. And then you can also change it to the old visual style, which was in the original one, which you actually click over here. It's like, I actually like this one a little bit better, but it also changes the in-game menu, so I'm going to go ahead and stick it on modern because I like the modern one in-game better. then you get your screen resolution. Now we're going to start talking about the PC specific stuff. So you get your screen resolution, 16:9 or 16:10 resolutions. It doesn't seem to be specifically set. I don't know if 720 is actually as low as you can go. I assume it is because that's what I get here. But it does actually go all the way up to 4K as they advertised. And if you run anything besides 16:9 or 16:10, it's going to have black bars. And when I set it to 16:10 just to check out what it looked like, it seemed like it was somewhat stretching a lot of HUD elements. And so I recommend playing the game at 16:9 if you can. Otherwise, 16:10 works as well, or you got to deal with bars, or just run it in windowed mode, which the game does support. Now, you'll notice that I am technically recording in full screen, but I'm not actually playing the game in full screen. The game does not support borderless full screen, and it has a few issues when it's running in full screen. My game was tearing quite a bit, and the game doesn't have a VSync setting in itself, and I was too lazy to go through in my graphics driver and force it on. And so basically, I'm using an app called Windowed Borderless Gaming, I think is what it's called, and it forces these types of games to run in borderless mode, and it seems to work perfectly fine, so that's why I'm in windowed mode. This game also has a few issues with trying to run the game in full screen for some people, to where it just shows a black screen. I think that's sort of been like figured out. I think that it's something to do with DirectX or something like that, but the game also has a bunch of crashing issues I'll talk about a little bit later. Then you get your shadow buffer, which I wish it would show the actual resolution, but I'm at 4 times. It seems to work perfectly fine. Anti-aliasing, this game uses dithered effects, which was really popular back in the day. And so you're going to want FXAA on, and it only supports FXAA, which is super unfortunate, but you're going to need it on, or else you're going to have some really ugly dithered textures that just are not going to look good because it uses FXAA to actually look perfectly fine. And then you have camera blur and depth of field. Have them off. They look absolutely abysmal in this game. The depth of field is like 2 inches from your like actual camera, and it's just terrible. And then you actually have character display distance, which keep in mind, this is not actual like display distance. It is just for the characters. So like enemies on screen and stuff like that. Have this on far, although if you're having performance problems, I guess drop it. I don't really know. I wish this was actually a display distance option because there are some display issues when it comes down to shadows. Shelf shadowing, I don't know if this was in the original game because it has some weird glitchiness here and there, but at the same time, it looks like 2009 self-shadowing. Not terrible. And then you get your texture resolution. Now, one thing to note about this is it does default to the high resolution. If you are on a low spec machine and try running the game and it crashes when you're loading into an area, try switching it to low resolution. Your graphics card may not support 4K textures or the 2K textures that they're mostly using. And so you might just be running out of VRAM and causing the game to crash. So keep that in mind. It does not do any sort of helping when you actually run out of resources. It will just outright crash. And so there you go. And that's what the settings actually has. There is no ANISO setting. And so I actually had to force that in my graphics driver, which isn't particularly difficult to do. You can look up how to do that on your own. However, it does have a few crashing issues, which I'll talk about now. Now, one thing I should mention though, is that the title screen, there is no way to actually exit the game. And so when I was actually starting the game, it has about a 30-minute sort of section to where you got to play through the beginning cutscene, which is unskippable, which is super frustrating because it really doesn't have any relevance to what's going on in the game whatsoever. But you can't skip that, which is about 20 minutes, which is ridiculous. No wonder people hate this game. And then after that, you get a kind of combat simulation, and then you get a kind of prologue section of the game to where you can't actually access the menu. The only menu in the game that has an exit game option is the one inside the game, which will show off in a second once I load into my game. You can see I'm only 4 hours in. I'm not very far. I apologize for that. But this is the only option to actually quit the game is inside this menu here, and then it's quit game. And there's no actual return to title screen either. And so this is just quit game and it exits to the desktop. I assume this used to return to the title screen on console, and then they just made it so that this one exits to the desktop. It was just kind of lazy, and they just didn't add in other menu options, which is dumb, in my opinion. I think that's super frustrating. It's one of the most frustrating parts about this port, but there are other issues as well. Now, how I did close it is I would hold down the Windows key and hit Tab, and it would pull up the Windows sort of thing, and then you'd be able to do it. However, you can just hit the X, I believe, and then it will actually close the game. Now, you can actually change all of your graphics settings while in-game, and it will change live while you're actually playing it, which is super nice. That's actually rare for a Square Enix port, but the game does have a few other issues as well. And so one major one is actually that it requires your audio device to be lower than or lower than 48K, which basically means if your graphics driver, or not graphics driver, your audio driver that you're using is running at anything above 48 hertz, you're basically going to have the game crash when you try to launch it up. And I did have this problem, and I don't know of a way to fix it. It's a problem in a lot of older PC games, and it's kind of asinine that it's in this newer modern port and everything like that. And so it's kind of annoying that it's here, but basically to be able to fix it, I can actually show it off in a second. Is it going to allow me to do that? Hold on, let me see if my actual bar will show up. It will not. It's being frustrating. All right, hold on 1 second. Boop. There we go. Okay, so at the bottom, you're actually able to go to your Windows speaker option, go ahead and right click, and you'll go back to your playback devices. This is if it crashes and actually has an error. You can go to your speakers, go to properties, and then you go over to your advanced settings. And right here is your default format. You have to change this to 48K or lower. Obviously, 48K is where I'm going to stick, or 48 hertz is where I'm going to end up sticking because that's the highest quality the game supports. If you have it anything higher, it'll just crash when you try to launch it, which is very, very annoying. There's also a few other issues, such as people having problems with full screen. For some people, full screen just isn't working properly, and so basically you have to run the game in windowed mode. You can use the app I was talking about earlier to kind of fix that. You can go ahead and look it up on your own time. And then there is also one problem to where the game doesn't actually have any redistributables, which is going to be, I believe it uses Visual Studio 2013 and the DirectX. I can't remember what version it is, but basically people were having a crashing error when they first launched the game, and it wasn't allowing them to access the game. By updating their DirectX or their Visual Studio redistributables, basically they were able to get the game to run. So it doesn't actually, have its actual requirements to run the game included with the game. This could be patched in the future, but at the same time, it's just something that's super, super annoying and not something that most people are going to know how to fix. Basically, just go ahead and look it up on the forums. There's a lot of people that have been having the problem, and they've figured out different ways. There's also been some lower-end machines having problems with the game just randomly crashing when loading into areas. I already mentioned that you can lower the kind of texture resolution to actually, fix that. Now, there is one draw distance issue I will talk about in a second, but when it comes to visuals, the game actually looks fucking great. I actually like the way the game looks a lot. They actually did a great job when updating the textures. Yes, there's some pretty gnarly textures here and there, and they obviously didn't update everything. The polygons are definitely from 2009. The menus are definitely outdated, but at the same time, it's an older game, and so I was kind of expecting that. Now, one view distance issue that we are going to have is if you observe the trees in the mountain off in the distance, you'll notice that the shadows just kind of pop in. This is something that was on the console originally, and so I think it's an engine limitation, but it is fairly noticeable, especially when you end up getting into these large open fields. But that's the only view distance issue I've been seeing. Everything else seems to slowly pop in very, very nicely and just seems very smooth, especially when enemies are pretty far away, when they actually pop in. And so we'll actually look over there, and I believe on the right side, you'll actually see, they kind of fade in stuff. Everything else seems to do that. However, the shadows don't, which is just super, super distracting. But yeah, the game actually looks pretty great. They did a great job updating all the textures. No, it doesn't look like a modern game, and the polygons are not particularly great. There's some effects that are very artifacted. The pre-rendered cutscenes especially are pretty bad. I would say they're pretty artifacted because they were meant to run at 1920 by 1080. They're not actually at 4K, which it would be hilarious if they included 4K. It would make this game absolutely gigantic, which it already is. I think it's somewhere around 80 gigs or something like that. And so that's all the kind of textures and stuff that they end up updating. But I'm actually liking the way the game looks. They did a good job in updating the way the game looks, and it actually runs perfectly fine. Going into the positives of the port, the game runs at a perfectly solid 60 FPS. Now, the game is locked at 60 FPS, and so you are going to be stuck with that resolution, but at the same time, or not resolution, that hurts. But at the same time, that is something that is expected. It is an older game. They kind of designed it to run at that setting because it was on console. And so that isn't something I'm necessarily wondering if they're going to ever fix. And I don't think they necessarily need to. I think 60 is definitely, acceptable. But what's important is the game actually runs perfectly fine. And so it's definitely the definitive version of the game when you actually get it running. Once you get past the crashing issues and the weird sort of issues with full screen, it runs perfectly fine. It runs perfectly great. There are some issues with, people trying to play with a keyboard and they're not necessarily liking it. The game itself actually has a lot of problems as well. The voice acting and stuff, especially her specifically, she's supposed to be very monotone and non-expressive, but at the same time, they just did it in such a boring way. They could have done it so much more entertainingly. But yeah, so far for the game itself, the technical side of it, aside from what I mentioned when actually starting it up, runs fine. I've actually had no issues with it. Once the game's running, I even forget that it has technical problems to begin with, and I'm so used to playing older games that have these terrible port issues that I actually look at this as one of the better Square Enix ports, which is kind of hilarious, especially when you actually look at things like Final Fantasy, which has actually been getting absolutely abysmal for ports and everything. When you actually look at the characters and stuff like that, some of the self-shading issues I'm kind of mentioning here is you'll notice on his arm he has some weird glitching going on and his hair is pretty bad. They use a dithering effect for that. That's why I was talking about you need FXAA on. If you turn it off, it looks all dithered and ugly and stuff. This is a problem with a lot of these older types of games. And so, yeah. So what are my opinions on the game so far? Now, I'm only a few hours into it, but people have compared it to, like, story-wise, they've compared it to Star Trek, but anime. I don't know what that means, but I was told to use that as a good comparison when I was talking to other people about it, because they're like, oh, yeah, like, people know Star Trek. I don't know anything about Star Trek, but it is sci-fi. It's sort of sci-fi, and you're going between planets and, like, talking to locals and kind of figuring out what's going on at each planet, and you're kind of acting as, like, a savior of the world sort of thing, because the Earth is destroyed, and that's basically what the beginning cutscene tells you. And so I guess that's what Star Trek is about. I don't actually know, but so far I'm enjoying the game, actually. I think the gameplay is pretty fun. It kind of reminds me of the Tales of series. It's not as in-depth as the new combo systems that you'll find in like Tales of Berseria or Zestiria, which I actually love that combat system quite a bit, although it does run itself dull. This game kind of stays on the sort of smoother side of things, to where it's like, you know, you don't really have all that much control. You have enough control that it's like, I know when to attack and stuff like that, but it's more about kind of planning out your attacks and your movements. And you actually have a counter system, which is called Blindside, which I absolutely am failing at now. I've been trying to do it this entire game. But so far, the game only has 4 characters and it's 4 hours into the game, which has been mostly cutscenes, so I actually haven't been able to level up all that much, but you'll see I'm actually leveling up quite a bit. This game has a lot of like classic JRPG elements that I actually like, especially when you start off the game. It's like you have 2 people and you barely have any items or anything like that, and I love that experience, and it actually made it feel like I had to go and scavenge for items, and so like the game actually has quite a bit of that so far, and I've been told that the game gets incredibly easy later on, and I don't know if that's because people over level, because this game allows you to do whatever you want. But it is open world as well. Like all the locations that you've unlocked, you can just travel between them, and it's just kind of open so far. Story-wise and voice acting-wise, though, it's all right. I think the story is kind of cheesy. It's like, oh, the world was destroyed, and they're like, all right, we're going to go search other planets for a good home, and then something inevitably goes wrong because, of course, it's a video game. And I feel like the story is just kind of there. I'm not necessarily invested in the characters either. Like, the characters have some nice personalities to them, and they are unique inside this game specifically, but they're definitely, like, not award-winning or anything like that. Also, another annoying thing with the camera, which this is just the game, it starts it on the side instead of above you or anything. You can change the camera as well. Like, you could change it so it's above at all times, which is actually the way I like to play the game. It's just really hard to see around things sometimes. But yeah, the combat so far is pretty good. Story is sort of, man, when it comes down to voice acting, I have tried both English and Japanese, and the problem with it isn't actually that everything is terrible. It's actually the fact that most of it is terrible, but then you get certain scenes and certain characters that are actually voiced really well, like Remy, which is the female character you'll see in the background. Also, you can switch characters as well, which is kind of nice. And so I can switch over to Remy here. Yay, and you also have special abilities and stuff like that as well, so I can use one and go... Nice penetration arrow. But yeah, so like Remy, for example, actually has a lot of great lines. She has some bad ones too, but she has a lot of great lines, and you immediately switch over to another character that just has an absolutely abysmal line, and it creates this contract that changes it from being like, oh, it's cheesy voice acting, whatever, I can deal with it, to being like, this had potential, what the hell did they do to screw this up? And it's like that for both the English and voice, like Japanese voices, and so basically it's kind of like choose your poison. I find that Remy is absolutely abysmal in the Japanese voices, and then when I actually switch over to English, she's kind of tolerable. I find the main character to be tolerable inside the actual Japanese version, but then when I switch it over to English, I'm like, wow, he's actually kind of abysmal in a lot of places. And so it's just really kind of choose your poison and whatever you prefer. If you know Japanese, go ahead and jump over to Japanese, or if you don't want to actually hear the dialogue at all, and you just want to be like, I don't know, you can actually mute it completely, which is something that you can do. But yeah, it's actually nice that it includes both options, because some people prefer one over the other. If you watch a lot of anime, you'll probably like the Japanese voices better. I was actually talking with a friend about that, and he said that that's probably definitely the case, is that most people that, you know, watch a lot of anime, they're kind of used to that sort of style of speaking, and so you'll pretty much get a lot of the lines. You'll notice that some is sort of not so great, but yeah. And that has been a lot of people's complaints so far on the game, is just the overall quality. It's not a like fantastic game, but so far it's been an all right game, and it's definitely a game I want to keep playing, and that's mostly because I'm a sucker for sci-fi, and so I like sci-fi quite a bit. This is sci-fi, but it also kind of mixes into like, let's look at this, we're like in an ancient temple and stuff like that, and there's puzzles and stuff like that as well. Like I actually had to go through, and I haven't finished this dungeon because basically save points are like scattered way far apart, and so I was in this dungeon for like 30 minutes and I hadn't reached another save point, and so I had to run back to the start. But basically there's these platforms, you have to use little gems that you find and stuff like that, and you have to put them in and change up platforms that change the upper level and stuff like that. So there's some interesting puzzles and things like that, and a lot of classic JRPG stuff. You're going to be doing a lot of this. It's like dashing through maps and stuff like that, but Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a JRPG and you want a sci-fi one, that's all right. I mean, don't expect a great, amazing experience or anything like that, but at the same time, it's all right. I mean, it's something. Oh, that's an annoying sound. I don't know why it's doing that. I've never played as this character. What am I doing? I don't even know. Also, to switch characters, you have to hit the start key, which is kind of weird. You can't actually select. I don't know actually how to use magic because I haven't actually set this up, but you can actually change all your tactics and stuff like that. You can change what skills people use. It has a nice equipment system. And yeah, if I ever actually get more deep into the game, I'll end up talking about those and stuff like that. But I don't actually know how to use spells, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a character that I actually know how to play. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this one. And make sure you leave your thoughts on this game below. If you guys actually ended up checking this out, I don't really know. I never played the original one, and so this is all new to me, and I didn't actually check out a lot of the Star Oceans. Like I said, it was back on PS1. I believe I said that. Was that my intro? I don't know. I tried recording that intro like 7 times. But the last one I actually checked out was Second Story, which was all the way back on the PS1, and I thought it was all right. I never finished it, and it didn't captivate me as much as other JRPGs at the time. But it was all right. And so this one so far, once again, I'm getting that same feeling to where it's like, it's all right. I don't really have a pushing force to kind of finish it. There isn't really a strong narrative pushing me forward. And maybe I just haven't gotten to that point yet. Maybe it's a really slow burn and it also has mandatory butt shots for some reason. It super annoys me. I don't know why. But overall, like, I actually like the port so well. Like, it's all right. It's not terrible. It could be worse. Like, the game itself plays fine. And that's what I care about in ports. And that's going to be mostly just me. Like, some people are going to care about, you know, a lot of different things. It could be like, oh, hey, well, it doesn't support my natural resolution, so they're going to hate the game. This is an opening. Oh, wait, is this a different door? Oh, that's the north door. There was a south door. Oh, I never noticed. I'm traveling in an area I've never done before, and I should never do that in videos like this. But yeah, I care more about performance when you're actually inside the game and whether the game plays fine. If you're using a controller, runs perfectly fine. Mouse has some issues. Oh yeah, I was going to show the mouse trying to move the camera. Trying to move the camera, it also doesn't lock it. And so basically once it goes into the other monitor, it just gets stuck and stops. And so yeah, don't use the mouse. But yeah, regardless, runs fine. I like it. Some other people might like it. Some other people might not like it. I would recommend checking out reviews for the actual game itself. Even like older reviews that don't actually have more modern reviews on it. I do know that it did get critically panned by a lot of like publications and stuff like that were like, it's just abysmally bad. It's not bad. It's not a bad game. It's just not a great game. Also, I don't know how to get out of stun locks. So I'm just terrible at this game as well. I'm also trying to talk. So yeah, it's all right. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, like I said, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I hate her voice. I don't know why. I hate it.